The Middle East once again found itself on the brink of a wider conflict this week, a situation that began with a decisive and controversial military action ordered by the United States. Over the weekend of June 21st, President Donald Trump authorized a swift and powerful bombing campaign against three of Iran's most sensitive nuclear facilities. This American strike, which included the well-known Fordo facility, was presented by Washington as a necessary preemptive measure to neutralize what it described as an imminent threat. The bombing marked a significant escalation in the long-simmering tensions between the two nations, pushing diplomatic channels to the breaking point and setting the stage for an inevitable response from Tehran. Iran's leadership did not wait long to make its intentions clear. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a powerful branch of the Iranian military, immediately vowed that the American attack would not go unanswered. In a series of defiant statements, officials declared that any assault on Iran's sovereignty and national security would be met with a firm and proportional retaliation. This promise was not just political rhetoric, it was a direct warning to the United States and its allies in the region. The world watched and waited, knowing that Iran felt compelled to demonstrate its strength and resolve in the face of the American military action, making a counterstrike almost a certainty. The target chosen for this retaliation was highly symbolic: the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. This sprawling facility is not just another military installation, it is the largest and most important American base in the entire Middle East. It serves as the forward headquarters for the U.S. Central Command, housing nearly 10,000 American troops and acting as the nerve center for U.S. military operations across the region. By targeting Al Udeid, Iran aimed to send a clear message directly to the heart of American military power in its neighborhood. The choice was a calculated risk, designed to demonstrate capability without perhaps triggering an all-out war with the United States. Ultimately, this sequence of events, the initial U.S. bombing followed by Iran's vow of retaliation, created a predictable yet dangerous chain reaction. The American strike was the spark, and Iran's missile launch was the explosion that followed. This tit-for-tat escalation, played out on the world stage, has left nations in the region and beyond grappling with the consequences. The attack on the base in Qatar was not a random act of aggression, but a direct, telegraphed response in a high-stakes confrontation that has now pushed the Middle East into a period of profound uncertainty, where every action carries the risk of further, more devastating conflict. On the night of June 23, 2025, the sky above Doha, the capital of Qatar, transformed into a terrifying theater of modern warfare. Residents, accustomed to the peaceful hum of their bustling city, were suddenly jolted by a series of deafening explosions. Looking up, they witnessed a scene of controlled chaos as streaks of light crisscrossed the darkness. These were not fireworks, but the fiery trails of Iranian ballistic missiles arcing toward their target, met head-on by the interceptor missiles launched from American and Qatari air defense systems. For a period of about 20 to 30 minutes, the night was illuminated by the impacts, creating a frightening spectacle of fire and sound that shook buildings and rattled nerves across the city. The attack itself was a coordinated barrage. Iran's IRGC launched what U.S. officials later confirmed were between 12 and 19 short and medium-range ballistic missiles from sites inside Iran. Their target was the heavily fortified Al Udeid Air Base, located just outside Doha. However, the base was prepared. Intelligence and advance warnings, reportedly passed through back channels, had given the U.S. and its Qatari partners time to activate their defenses. The powerful Patriot missile batteries, designed specifically to shoot down incoming projectiles, performed with remarkable precision. One after another, the incoming Iranian missiles were destroyed in mid-air, preventing a catastrophic outcome on the ground.
I saw the sky light up with what looked like hundreds of missiles, and the rumbles honestly felt like an earthquake. At first, I was terrified that the city would be hit directly. But then, as the explosions kept happening up in the air, it started to sink in that maybe, just maybe, the interceptors were working. It was a small comfort, but it helped a little, you know?
Debris from the intercepted missiles rained down in parts of Doha, but miraculously, no injuries were reported among the civilian population. Nevertheless, the event left an indelible mark, shattering the sense of security for many residents. The Iranian missile strike immediately sent diplomatic shockwaves across the globe, prompting a flurry of statements from world leaders. In Washington, President Trump, who had ordered the initial bombing of Iran's nuclear sites, convened an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. He had previously warned that any retaliation from Iran would be met by force far greater, but the lack of U.S. casualties appeared to temper the immediate response. The White House acknowledged the attack but emphasized the success of the missile defense systems, framing the event as a failed attempt by Iran to inflict damage. This allowed the administration to claim victory while carefully considering its next move.
The missile launch was a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty. We reserve the right to respond to this unacceptable act.
Despite this firm public stance, behind the scenes, Qatari officials were reportedly instrumental in de-escalating the crisis. Acting as mediators, they helped facilitate communication between Tehran and Washington, which ultimately led to a fragile ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel, who were engaged in a separate, simultaneous conflict. Qatar's dual role as both a victim of the attack and a key mediator highlights its complex and crucial position in the region's geopolitics.
Regional neighbors reacted with a mixture of alarm and solidarity with the United States and Qatar. Key Gulf allies, including the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, swiftly condemned Iran's actions, viewing the strike as another example of Tehran's destabilizing influence in the region. Air defense systems were activated at other U.S. bases in Iraq and Kuwait as a precaution.
In contrast, Oman, which has often played the role of a neutral intermediary, adopted a more measured tone. Omani officials called for de-escalation from all sides, pointing out that the crisis had been triggered by the preceding attacks on Iran, and urged a return to diplomacy to prevent a wider war.
Meanwhile, the ongoing shadow war between Israel and Iran erupted into open conflict. As Iran launched its missiles at the U.S. base, Israel continued its own campaign of strikes against targets inside Iran, including the IRGC headquarters in Tehran. In response, Iran fired a separate barrage of missiles towards southern Israel, tragically killing 4 civilians in the city of Beersheba. This dangerous escalation between the two regional archenemies added another volatile layer to the crisis. The international community watched with grave concern as these parallel conflicts threatened to merge into a single, uncontrollable regional conflagration, making the calls for a ceasefire all the more urgent. In the immediate wake of the attack and the whirlwind of international diplomacy, a fragile and tense quiet has descended upon the region. The most significant development was the announcement of a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran, brokered by the United States with Qatari assistance. This agreement, which took effect in the early hours of June 24th, managed to pull the two adversaries back from the brink of a full-scale war. Oil prices, which had surged amid fears of a major conflict, fell sharply as news of the ceasefire and the limited nature of the Iranian retaliation became clear, reflecting a collective sigh of relief from global markets. Despite the ceasefire, the situation remains far from stable. The Middle East is on high alert, with the recent violence causing widespread disruption. In the aftermath of the missile strikes, airspace was temporarily closed over Qatar, the UAE, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq, leading to the cancellation of hundreds of flights and creating travel chaos. In Doha, schools were closed for the day following the attack, a stark reminder to residents of the sudden violence that had shattered their city's peace. The fear and uncertainty linger as people across the region wait to see if the fragile truce will hold, or if another provocation will reignite the conflict.
The key question now is what happens next. Analysts believe Iran's strike on Al Udeid was a calculated one-off event. It was designed to be a powerful statement of its military capability and its willingness to respond to attacks, while being carefully managed to avoid causing American casualties, which would have almost certainly triggered a massive U.S. military response. By telegraphing the attack, Iran engaged in a form of high-stakes political theater, signaling its desire to de-escalate its direct confrontation with the United States, even as its conflict with Israel reached a boiling point.
The focus now shifts back to the diplomatic arena. The world is now watching Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem for their next moves. Will the ceasefire between Iran and Israel hold? Will the United States and Iran find a way to step back from the brink and re-engage in some form of dialogue, or will the underlying tensions continue to fester? The events of the past week have shown how quickly the region can spiral toward war, but also how back-channel communications and international mediation can work to avert the worst-case scenario. For now, an uneasy calm prevails, but the fundamental conflicts that ignited this crisis remain unresolved, leaving the future of the Middle East hanging in the balance.